So I wanted to share with you another pillar of Breakthrough's theory of change. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do in terms of bringing human rights home is transform the hearts and minds of individuals and other actors to become what we call rights advocates. And we want you to be a rights advocate in whatever location that you might find yourself in. Whether it's your home, whether it's your school, whether it's your workplace, whether it's in a government institution that you might find yourself, but that we want you to understand that change has to begin with you, that it really starts with you. And as part of that strategy, in addition to the mass media work that we do, where I showed you the ads, we also do very deep community-based work, both leadership development and community mobilization. And the video that I just shared with you is of a group of young Muslim women in a city called Lucknow who happen to be embroidery workers. You saw the woman at the end who was embroidering. This is very old traditional Zardozi embroidery that is from that region of India. And these young women, and here I'm also showing, I'm trying to show you the connection that we make between arts, culture, and rights. These young women have never left their homes and been in public spaces, and they find that being a part of a puppet group gives them the kind of agency, because there is that that's still of one step removed. They had to really negotiate a lot within their families to emerge in the public space that they now occupy. But they find that using the puppets really gives them a lot of power in catalyzing community conversations about different human rights issues. And we've trained in the last 5 years, I keep kind of losing track of the numbers, but about 50,000 people, young people as well as individuals within organizations that work at the community level. So, for example, we work with organizations that work with migrant laborers, or service providers of different sorts, or government officials at the local level. It's extremely challenging because this kind of change that you're seeing, the articulation of this kind of change, is slow. It requires intensive work over time. So this whole conversation that we've had in the last day about depth and impact and scale and impact is one that I think that is really a very important one for us to have, because we've been dealing now for the last so many years in the women's movement of trying to transform at the big aggregate level, and we still continue. I'm so sick of it 30 years later that we still continue to deal with the pandemic levels of violence that affect women's lives. So this question of how do we do the scale as well as the depth impact is something that we grapple with constantly. It's not always a very rosy picture. A few months ago, one of the sisters of, a sister of one of the women who had become a rights advocate in another state that we work in committed suicide. And she committed suicide because she was being severely battered by her husband, had been to the cops 3 or 4 times, and they had basically ignored all of her requests for assistance, and finally she was beaten really badly by her husband, and she killed herself. There's a big question as to whether she killed herself or whether he killed her, but the official verdict was suicide. And this was a devastating moment for all of us who are working at the community level at Breakthrough, because you know, this theory of change that you empower and that you create a community of people around you, and that somehow provides you with the guts and the protection to be able to move forward, really slammed up against the wall of what happens when you don't have government policies and services in place to then deal with the whole issue of impunity, which is something else that we've talked about a lot. Because here we had a situation where this man could continue to basically torture her with impunity. And so as a result of that, we have started to work with cops and prosecutors. And you know, we've been doing that work in the women's movement for many, many years. But we find that when you look at a community and say, okay, in this state of, say, Karnataka or Uttar Pradesh, we're going to work in 7 districts and really mobilize multiple stakeholders around the issue of violence against women. So we're not just going to work with young women, we're not just going to work with the government, we're not just going to work with religious leaders, We're going to work with everybody who plays a role in affecting that woman's life. And so then those rights advocates, like the young women that you saw, aren't just transforming their individual lives, they're then beginning to intervene in their families and at the community level around all of the social, cultural, economic, and political norms that affect their lives. And that's the theory of change that we're trying to figure out how to go to scale with.